Hi, welcome to Watcher DM. I'm Gabriel. Today I am doing a flip through review of Into the Odd. This is the remaster, I believe, by Chris McDowall. Writing and rules by Chris McDowall. Graphic design and art by Johan Nohr. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Obviously, the book itself is gorgeous. This is kind of a work of art book. It's got a glossy finish on the pink parts of the image that really kind of makes it stand out. And the use of this bright orange against this teal color just makes for a very visually stunning book. The construction is incredible. It's thread bound, so it's a sewn binding, and it floats pretty well in the case. It definitely feels like it's going to last a good long time. I also really love that they used the kind of traditional style marbling in the back here, but left the imperfections. So the marbling imperfections are kind of retained, which I think really adds to the authenticity of the book. So, okay, enough book nerd stuff. By the way, this is an A5 ish. I think it is probably A5 sized book, so that's where it'll fit on your bookshelf should you get it. I already gave you this information. Of course, you can find out more about Chris McDowall's work at bastionland.com, where he does all of his stuff through Bastionland Press. And if you've been to my channel before, you've probably seen something of mine about Mythic Bastionland, which has become one of my fast favorite games. And so I've decided to do a little bit of the archaeology on the other side, where I spent some time with the Cairn rule set, which is a hack of Into the Odd, made by Johan Nohr. And then I was like, well, now that I've done that, I guess I better go check out Into the Odd, so I can speak with some authority about what this is. So I have been running the Wonderland book by Andrew Kolb, using Into the Odd as the rule set for my mother, who is not a role player. She's never really played role playing games before. And finally, after seeing, I think, a show and maybe, kind of showing her the Wonderland book a little bit, she was like, wow, I think I want to do this. And I was like, okay, we're going to do turn of the century London. And, there's a way to get to Wonderland, there's a way to get to Neverland, and there's a way to get to Oz, all from within kind of London / Bastionland. And so that's what I've been doing with this. Fortunately, the book is designed in such a way to make character creation super easy, which is a very important characteristic. I like that the setup here, just the introduction, gives you like a very clear understanding of what the game is trying to do. So it just describes the world as being too big to map and it's too old to record. You play an explorer, in whatever sense that means. Of course, I'm deviating from this setting in my play, but I do like how this is established. Like, the world is huge. There's one big city everybody lives in, and the underground is like this crazy nest of stuff under the ground. So yeah, it's pretty great. Really simple chapter 1, new to RPGs. Say what you want about the rules. You can read this in an afternoon. Like, it's pretty brief. I think it says, what it needs to say and tries to get out of its own way. Some might argue, and I think I probably would at some level, that this is maybe too rules light, favoring rulings over rules, to a certain amount of exclusion. And yeah, I think, for certain types of games, I wouldn't rely on a rule set like this. But for other types of games, I think this is kind of pitch perfect and just does the right thing. And it starts with rolling a character. One of the things that my mother expressed to me about her resistance to play role-playing games heretofore, I've been playing for 30-something years. My mom's been my mom the whole time. And never has she been like, oh, I want to play. And I think she expressed that one of the things holding her back was she felt like she needed to make up a character. She needed to make up a whole character. And she just couldn't really imagine who else she would want to be, which I think is fine. That's probably the sign of a good, healthy ego. But so when I told her that, into the odd, you kind of roll your character like you just generate it from the book here. She was like, "Oh, well, that sounds like pretty fun. That sounds like what I want to do." So you start by rolling 3d6 in each of your ability scores: strength, dexterity, and will. You roll a d6 for your hit protection, and then you consult the starter packages table on the next page. And then if you're just one person, you might get some companions. So you roll their ability scores, you give them 1 hit point and a hand weapon. Your starter package is a lookup table from your hit points. So what did you roll on your hit points, mixed with what your highest ability score is. So if you've got an 18, but you only have 1 hit point, you get a garrote, a musket, and the mute spell. Whereas if you have 6 hit points and you have an 18, you get a mace, a pigeon, and you are disfigured. Oh, you know what? Actually, that is not the mute spell. That means you are mute. You cannot speak. So, yeah. Pretty wild. This game goes hard. So it does say more information can be found on the equipment list, and the Arcana are rolled randomly. So a couple of these will have Arcanum in the list. So sense nearby Arcana. Actually, I think there's just a few that have Arcanum in them, and we'll get to what those are in a moment. The equipment lists. Probably one of my least favorite decisions in this book is how the equipment lists are done. Not because I think that they're bad, but they're a little inconsistent how things are presented, and it doesn't really make it like super easy to look up things. I have always found comma-separated lists of words to be a little less approachable than your normal list or table represented things. Despite the convenience of this, basically saying everything in this pile here is 1 shilling. Of course, this uses pennies, shillings, and guilders, which fits nicely with my usage here. And then, they kind of do a weird thing here, right? Where it's like you've got your pricing is sorted here on the left with comma-separated values on the right. But here you get, an item on the left with each of the sub-items in a separate list on the right with their own pricing. I kind of don't care which, but I would kind of have preferred to pick one. But maybe that's just my, I've got opinions about things. I'm a programmer, so I'm like, I could have figured out a way to do that. But it's fine. This is fine. I also like that the hirelings are just kind of a footnote here. You get a lighter boy or a mercenary or an expert, and it's just like, this is how much they cost per day. And boom, there you go. You get your companions going. The other thing I will say is that, the expression of what's in the game here in equipment does not in any way help you to adjudicate how this can be used. And that's probably fine, but just keep it in mind that, the book isn't going to provide you any support in terms of, what does a magnifying glass do? How sturdy are lockpicks? This isn't that game, right? You're going to want to have this stuff on your character sheet so that you can refer to it when you're justifying doing something. And I think, by and large, Into the Odd and other games like it, if you have the tools to do the thing, usually that is enough for you to do the thing without a check, I think is the idea. Anyway, let's keep going. I feel like I'm going to be on this forever. Playing the game. Saves, turns, and actions. This is pretty much what most of the game is. You will roll saves against your ability scores when something is going to happen. And that's the risk. You're first, avoiding the risks of things. Players usually go first. If it's possible that they won't, then they make a dex save. So that's kind of how initiative works, is on the first turn. If the players don't make their dex save, they don't go. And then the enemies go, and then at the top of the next turn, the players go first. So this is kind of their solution to that. Also, doesn't really solve any problems for like, oh, I'm in an online group and I have 3 people who would love to go first, who are jumping in. In an online group, talking over each other is kind of annoying, so having some structure to that is helpful. But at the table, this is fine. And obviously, in my case, I'm playing duet. This is totally fine. Actions. So it does say here on their turn, a player can move and perform an action. It's pretty loose on what that means. And then you've got attacks. Now, attacks are done very similar to how Karen works. In fact, I think it's exactly how Karen works. Basically, you roll your damage die for the weapon you're using, and you subtract the opponent's armor score from what you rolled. Now, some people would say, well, this is always damage then. You always are rolling damage. There's no such thing as missing. You don't roll a 2-hit. And so how do I dodge? And I would counter that having 1 point of armor and the enemy rolling a 1 is a miss. And in fact, a 2 has become 1 point of damage. So yeah, there's an interesting kind of interplay there where the better your armor is, the more likely you are to not get hit, which is kind of appropriate in an interesting way, but it also mitigates damage. So yeah, while I don't think I would have on the surface seen this as like any, I would be like, oh, that's kind of weird. It actually makes some sense, and I'm warming to it. I think I've come to embrace it and internalize the notion of the rule. The other rule that I think is kind of fantastic on this is impaired and enhanced, which means that if you're attacking while impaired, your damage is just a D4, regardless of the weapon you're using. Now, there are weapons that are already D4, so, does that mean you're fighting impaired with those weapons? I don't know. But that's what the rule is. And then, similarly, attacks that are enhanced by risky stunts or the helpless or vulnerable target roll a D12 damage. So this is how you get D12s on the table. And yeah, I think that's a really elegant solution to what would otherwise be, I think, advantage and disadvantage in a 5e like game, where you really want to show that they can do extra damage or be better at their attack because of the situation. It's an elegant system. Blast damage hits all targets in an appropriate area. You do roll separate damage for each according to this. I think that's probably a little cumbersome. I would probably not do that if I was to, encounter this, but that is how it's written. That just seems like a lot of rolling, but maybe that's fine. And then, yeah, so if there's a doubt how many targets are affected, roll the weapon's damage die to find out how many are affected. This could ultimately make a blast attack only hit one guy, which would feel pretty bad, I think. So I might come up with a reasonable facsimile of a solution to that. But also, I think that's probably fine too. When an individual takes damage, they lose that many hit protection. If they have no hit protection left, they are wounded, and any remaining damage is removed from their strength score. Now, this is probably one of the most critical components of odd-like games, is that the more damage you take, the weaker you become, and the less capable you become of mitigating strength-based or vigor-based impact, right? So critical damage is kind of the same mechanism. So if you take a wound, you roll a strength save, and if you fail, you are critically damaged. Critically damaged character can't move. Basically, they can crawl, but they basically die without aid in an hour. And then you can use Arcanum as a normal action. Some Arcana require some kind of payment. Ability score loss. So if your strength is reduced to 0, you're dead. If your dex is or will is reduced to 0, you are either paralyzed or mentally broken, respectively, and you can't act until you've had a full rest. We'll get to full rest in a second. Death. When a character dies, the player creates a new character, and the referee finds a way to have them join the group as soon as possible. Here, quickness is required over realism. Alternatively, the player may control a hireling or apprentice. So here it is saying if you die, you die. Move on. Which, yeah, I'm glad that that's articulated clearly. Deprived is important. This is kind of how you handle conditions that prevent you from basically healing or recovering from rest. And so it can be used to kind of satisfy the needs of like a poison or a disease or exhaustion, things like that. So deprived works pretty well in those cases. Reactions. So you can use basically you can use a will save to avoid an unfavorable reaction. It does indicate that some encounters are always hostile or always friendly, but all have the potential to change after first contact, which I really like that he articulates that. And then morale, groups will require a morale save to avoid being routed when they lose half of their total numbers. And then I think, yeah, it doesn't really have morale. Yeah, so actually it does. So when a lone combatant gets to 0 hit points or 0 hit protection, they also need to make a morale check. And if you've taken them over 0, right, if they've gone into their strength and they're wounded, they also need to make a critical, like a save, strength save, to see if they take critical damage. So it's just worth remembering because it is a little bit tricky to keep in mind. Like, oh, okay, we've gone past that threshold. We need to do these 2 things, right? This kind of extra steps. Short rests, a few minutes of rest and a swig of water recovers all of your character's hit protection. So hit protection is kind of the big swingy component here, where after every fight you can usually refresh your hit protection. But a full rest requires a week of downtime at a comfortable location. This restores all ability scores. The thing I like about this kind of use of normal language is that it allows you to tag things as being unusually comfortable. And like, while, a week might be difficult to obtain, we're in a magical timey-wimey world. Like, you don't know. I think you could use this to do some interesting things that might create opportunities for full rest that are more interesting than just, yeah, I stayed in bed and in for a week. Like, whatever. I just think that's a great full rest rule. Bulky items marked as bulky are generally require 2 hands or significant storage to carry. Bulky weapons require 2 hands to wield. Anyone carrying 3 or more bulky weapons is reduced to 0 hit protection. Arcana, so powers you cannot understand. These are objects. I'm not going to go into detail on these, but there are a couple of really good ones. Like, actually, there's a bunch of really good ones. All of these are pretty interesting, I think. They kind of stand in place for spells, kind of. I think there actually are spells in this game, but like they stand in place for magic items, and in some ways they kind of they create a scenario where your character can get abilities that might begin to approach what a character class might do in like a 5e or some other games. And so, yeah, I could see my characters kind of becoming defined by the arcanum that they have access to and what they've lost and things like that. The Tyrant's Rod. Order a target to drop, fall, flee, or halt unless they pass a will save. The Black Veil. Target must pass a will save or is blinded until you lift the curse or they rest. Blinded individuals may require a dex save to carry out other actions that rely on sight, and their attacks are impaired. Skull Magnet. You may attract or repel a single target that has a bony skull unless they pass a will save. Just really wild, weird stuff. And then you get the Greater Arcana. These are more powerful than the others, and these are more likely to be actively sought out by others. So these are the kinds of things that if you show off that you have them, or you might be hired to go get some of these, like that's kind of how they work. Some great art in here. I love all this stuff. And then Legendary Arcanum. Powers you shouldn't control. These are the things that, as a GM, you're going to want to use as set pieces. They're the kinds of things that have a big impact on the world. And so, putting them in the hands of the PCs is okay, so long as they are lifted from those hands relatively swiftly. A force field generator. Create a semi-transparent, shimmering surface that only you may pass through. Any enemy approaching the wall is blasted with light for D12 damage. The field lasts until dismissed or another field is created. Boom. And then we go into the examples of play. So chapter 5, from page 30 to page 35, is all just an example of play. And yeah, I think it's good. Like, you should read it. It does pretty clearly articulate how the game is intended to be played by the author, which is great. After the expedition, so this part's about progression and leveling up, which I noticed doesn't really exist the same way in some of the other games. So like Mythic Bastionland, for instance, kind of has progression through your rank. Like, you go from errant, it's like you're through maturity, right? You mature and you get glory, and then as that happens, you kind of get like courtly stuff, but you never really, your upgrades to your stats and stuff all come from your scars, when you get scars. Whereas in this, you definitely you progress through a series of tiers of levels. So from novice to professional to expert to veteran to master and beyond. And each tier that you achieve, so you start as a brand new character, you're ready to go on an expedition. You survive a single expedition since becoming a novice. Once this happens, you gain d6 hit points, and then for each ability score, you roll a d20. If you roll higher than that ability score, you add 1 to it. So I think MÖRK BORG has a similar device. There's a number of other games that kind of have this. I think Realms of Peril also has like a roll to improve your ability scores by 1. And yeah, works fine. I think that's a really clever way to resolve this. And then it does talk briefly about reputation. So the more powerful you become, people will react to you differently. There is a brief section in chapter 7 about enterprise and war. So this actually, I was surprised to find this here, but it articulates basically how you can kind of run a business in between in between sessions, basically, and how you can accumulate an army. So if you want to have a detachment, you have to buy one, and if you have one, it costs so much to upkeep it. Otherwise, they revolt, which is great. And then it talks about apprentices here, so you can take on an apprentice at any time, and you just make a willing non-player character, roll them up as new, and advance them to the experience level as normal under your guidance. Income is interesting because you face a threat that causes D4 Gilder in losses unless dealt with, and you generate D4 Gilder of income each month. So business, per Chris McDowall, is perpetual catastrophe being hopefully staved off to the sum of slightly equivalent profits. I just think that's great. I think that's pretty hilarious. If it does make a profit, its income moves up to the next die type. So every time you succeed on this, like facing the threat and making more money here, the die size goes up to a maximum of D12. So that's pretty cool. But it also applies to the losses from threats. So the die type of your entity, your enterprise, goes up. And so it costs. This is just a really interesting mechanic. I think that's super fun. Battles. Detachments attack against individuals are enhanced. Detachments are not harmed by individual attacks. So this is exactly the warfare rules from Mythic Bastionland. And then casualties. When they take critical damage, they are broken and cannot act until rallied. And at 0 strength, the detachment is wiped out. When half of it is broken, the remaining detachments, so when half of a force is broken, that's any number of detachments, the remaining detachments must pass a will save or be routed. And then, they recover on a short, it says short and long rest, just as with individuals, but actually this should say full rests. And then improvements, so equipping a detachment costs 20 times the individual item cost. Detachments start with D6 hit points and advance in experience levels just as individuals do. And then ships and structures, these ignore attacks weaker than a cannon and are destroyed at 0 hit points. Recovering HP takes a day of repairs. So that is used for this here. So these are your hit points and costs and armor and kind of what they can do for the different ships and structures, which I love that that's here and that it's so simple and elegant. And then they give you some sample leaders, which that's cool. Yeah, I don't think that's super crazy. but it gives you like a leader and their kind of detachments that they have, which is pretty cool. And then chapter 8 goes into refereeing. So give information, present choices, show impact, very clear articulation of what the DM does. Understanding ability scores. So this is just how to use ability scores in play. Luck rolls. So this is, roll high on a d6 is good for the PCs. Roll low is bad. Damage. This is just articulating that like damage should be between d4 and d8. D4 and d12. And like kind of how to apply damage. So if it's an effect like poison or gas or something, you might just go directly to an ability score loss instead of applying armor. Also, I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure if you take ability score loss to strength, but it isn't actually a blow from combat, you don't need to make you can't take critical damage from that. So worth noting that's kind of, because you're bypassing it, you don't do the critical damage check on this. Turn length. The turn is long enough for a character to move and carry out a single action, which is actually a mirroring of the player section that says the same thing. And then we go into treasure and riches. So again, we talks about the shilling standard, silver shilling standard. Discovering arcana and disposable arcana, arcana weapons, big arcana, side effects. Obstacles, tricks, and hazards. So spotting hazards, bypassing hazards, locked doors, some wandering encounters, rules, and then some sample hazards. Actually, I'm really pleased that they put this in here, despite it's only like a page of hazards, but like it's nice. It's nice to have. You're gonna want to come up with your own, obviously, pretty swiftly. But I think this is a great start. It's a good baseline to kind of build from. Encounters. This one, this section talks mostly about how to use encounters. And so like drive, right? It talks about motivation, what they want. Monsters, like, are going to be kind of special. An expedition site should contain mostly unique monsters, but some examples are given. So like, it's really saying you want to make unique monsters here. They should have up to 30 HP, so that's their hit protection. 30 is a lot, so just keep that in mind. And then otherwise they're just like characters. And then it does it does this a few times where it kind of says like, hey, like some things are like Arcana but are different, and you don't have to worry about not everything follows the rules. Like, that's fine. So it's nice here as it talks about giant creatures and how they are affected. How armor works, so you never want to have armor greater than 3, and like when you should apply different armor types. It largely comes down to size for monsters. You don't really want to give that, like, the small guys armor. And then damage. Basically, what I love about this is that it's like the default is D6. And then if it says otherwise, it's something else. So what's nice about that is you can just kind of start with the assumption, oh, it's a d6, and move from there. Particularly deadly creatures bestow horrible effects when they cause critical damage. So the monsters will say what their critical damage effect is. And then when assigning ability scores, 20 is the maximum. So you never put an ability score higher than 20. And then we've got some fun little monsters here. So the Dust Hag, the Strange Hunter, a Colossal Shell Beast, a Beckoning Shadow, a Thing of Glowing Smoke, a Bone Crawler, and a Dead Echo. Now, you'll notice there's no goblins on here. So you may have to do a little bit of work to get your, if you want to run some OSR adventure using Into the Odd, like, you're gonna want to do a little lifting. Luckily, there's a really great blog post by Chris McDowall that articulates a good way to do that, and there's a bunch of other people who have kind of written about the same topic because it was an immediate need, I think. And then we go into chapter 12, The Odd World. Talks about Bastion, the city, the underground. Beyond Bastion, there's the deep country and other cities. Beyond civilization, you've got the Golden Lands and the Polar Ocean. So these are places that are like kind of impossible to explore. They are that great beyond. And then we go into the provided adventure material. The introductory adventure for Into the Odd is called the Iron Coral. This thing is honestly kind of insane. So spoilers for the Iron Coral. Like, you should back out if you ever want to play this adventure. But the Iron Coral is a big weird object out by the ocean, and it begins here. This weird object here. You kind of come in through this side. The maps for this are really fun. The first level of the coral is 20 rooms. In fact, each level is 20 rooms. There's 3 levels, so this adventure has 60 rooms in it. I'm not going to articulate all of this. I'm not going to read through everything here and kind of give you all the bits. But some of my favorites from floor 1 are like Signs of Life, where the yellow slime twitches and is harmless. But there's a pulsing sac, balloon-like body with 2 sucker feet that faint with a faint glow. It uses its psychic scream if anyone interferes with the slime. So the slime is harmless, but if you touch it, it causes this pulsing sac to scream, and that causes all in the same room lose D6 will and begin to sweat blood. Anyone reduced to will 0 by this attack has their head explode. So I think you know what we're doing here. Like, this is brutal and really weird and really fun. So yeah, the foam room is another really funny one. There's some arcanum in here, so you can just kind of get some weird magical stuff going on in here. I think the spheres, I remember these being pretty fun. There is another arcanum, so the death and life hands are in this dungeon. There's a big weird set of jaws where you can, like, yeah, it's like a jaw trap. I think it's right here, yeah. But it's also got that nice, like, it leads you back out to the to the other part of the dungeon. And then the underground breach. So level 2, you come in from here. And again, you kind of explore another 20 rooms of dungeon. So you get the Coral Prince's Lair, heaps of dead coral. Carapace resting ground. A spiral room. A mutation chamber. You'll note that the wandering encounters are kind of like, it's kind of like per section, but I think it's just a duplicate. So yeah, they kind of opted to have the convenience of having your wandering encounters table on each page, which, interesting choice. Like, I don't hate it. But yeah, it's just really interesting to like have that repetition occur in the book. Another thing I want to call out is the way that they use these arrows here to kind of indicate like which direction a thing is, and then they kind of talk about the place that's flowing to, or what it is. It's clever. It's interesting. I am not super sold on this style. Like, it's good. It's honestly better than a lot of what I've done. But it still takes me a little bit to kind of grok what's happening. I think this kind of terseness, this kind of brevity is awesome, but it definitely requires the DM to do some extra work, and that's, I think, it is expecting you to do that work. Like, this game wants you to be a grown-up about it, which is, that's challenging, like, for anything to have expectations of you. And then we go into the halls of glass and gold, a place of luxury and fragility. Level 3, another 20-room dungeon. Again, we've got our wandering encounter tables. We got the fuel chamber, the repair shop, the butchery, the panic room, and the star leech. Weird stuff. I will say, I don't think very much from this dungeon. Like, don't run this and expect things to make sense. Like, in a way, right? Like, there's no justification given for why things are this way. So it's going to be weird, and I think your players should just expect it to be weird and kind of unhinged, and not necessarily be like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Like, explain to me why this is this way. Why is this room digesting it? Why is there a pile of dog here? Like, nope, no explanations. How do you find out? I think this game benefits from that a lot, but it does make for a very, we're going to call it Seaside Gonzo. It's very weird, weirdly salty. It's not like cartoon Gonzo. It's a very grounded kind of Gonzo, which works well with the art, honestly. The Echoes of the Iron Coral is a really fun mechanism that I don't think I would ever use, but it's just like how you come down into the Iron Coral changes when you come back. And so each day after the first, you roll a d6, and this is what the room you kind of go into. So it allows for kind of some replay and some variability in the dungeon design. With 60 rooms, I don't know that you need that per se. And then we go into the Fallen Marsh. The Fallen Marsh expresses... This is what's interesting about this, is it expresses your weather and traveling rules like here in front of a hex crawl that is using them, instead of having these rules back here where the rules are. It's like, no, this is a hex crawl. This is how you deal with a hex crawl. Which is cool. I think that's a really good way of doing it. But it's just, it kind of shocked me when I saw it. I was like, oh, interesting. What a strange way to do it. Also, the weather is like really simple, which is great. And then, yeah, you've got the landmarks. And so each hex contains a random encounter. So you roll a d20 as you're passing through them. And then you've got your hex contents. Again, very terse, punchy. There's 24 hexes. And the Iron Coral leads up to Hope's End. Love me an Ape Man, Warrior Statue, the Bunker, and the Thickwood down here. That's what she said. And then you've got the Marsh Myths. I feel like this is kind of the beginning of what became Mythic Bastionland. Like, I know that it isn't, or maybe it is, but like it just feels like one of those things where you hear a weird... let's just read one. The Swallowed Village. Once stood at the foot of a mountain with a view to the sea, but the marsh couldn't tolerate a place of such beauty. One by one, the homes were dragged down into the muck. Everybody you meet in the Fallen Marsh knows at least a few myths, and will share them if they like you or want to scare you. They speak in fragments and riddles, but it's all true, and they'll even point you in the right direction. Roll d12 for each person you meet. So anybody you meet out here might tell you one of these strange stories. Just a cool way to introduce it. Also, this hex crawl has 3 whole one-page dungeons in it that are like little micro-content for exactly, just, you're in the hex crawling, go into the Green Caves. And now you've got a little 7-room dungeon you can go knock around in. Oh, I'm sorry, 4? Yeah, it's 4. So it's got 4 dungeons throughout the hex crawl, about 1 every 6 hexes. Pretty cool. Pretty well designed. Hope's End, the last port of the north, is a town. And so you've got Paradiso Park, and the Pickled Goose Tavern and Board House, the docks, the Black Flamingo Trade House, the Sipping Hole, and the back streets. You got random encounters, random happenings and rumors. You've got some people, so some fun NPCs you can play. These are arrivals from Bastion, so these are the kind of ships that are in port. They'll be leaving soon. And then you've got, this is the crown jewel of the whole book, the Odd Pendium. These are weird tables for generating new content for Bastion. And basically the whole into the odd. So like you've got your cast of thousands, which I think... Yeah, so Bastion's cast of thousands, you get the forename and the surname, occupation and capability, and then manner and connection. So with the 6 D100 rolls, you can get a pretty unique character. And then what happened to them is another D100, so now you yet another dimension. You've got a way to generate streets, kind of what they're like. Is there a link to the underground? So if you're in a place and you just want to say, is there a way to get to the underground from here? You can roll that up. The quickest route across town is another fun little table. Bastion's greatest businesses just gives you a list of businesses that you can quickly roll up if you need a business for the party to run into. Weird creature inspiration is great. You can imagine a glassy baby bird with a mastery of magnetism, like very weird stuff you can come up with. The Astral Cults table is probably my favorite. So like the collective of their seekers, of devouring. They have a lie as their symbol, and they are hardly known. What's beyond the darkness? Drinking hole, collapsing floor hazard, spoils. So this is a good way to generate some treasure on the fly. What's that island? So you can quickly generate an island. Probably the best table in the game. I eat the stuff. Note, smelling the stuff gives a clue to its effect. So your voice is permanently higher pitched. So fantastic. There's some really fun stuff in here. Is this thing an Arcanum? And then, yeah, you kind of get some weird, like, oh, is this helmet an Arcanum? Sure, but not working now. Or, yes, and you've heard of it. It has the power to communicate great distances. It's a telephone helmet. Now you've got, this section here is kind of about alternate character groups. So mutants from the underground, if you want to play a mutant from down in the underground. And they've got a nice mutations table here, which is awesome. And then simple folks, so these are people from the deep country and other cities that didn't quite make it into the industrial age. So a little bit different. You get your, these are your same system, right? You get your rolls for your highest roll plus your hit points, and you look up, and that's what your little character has. And I think you get like a trinket. And then unhumans. This is really fun. This basically they put dwarves, elves, and halflings here. I think a little beast man, tiny green, sort of creepy looking. You get your goblins, your kobolds, right? Just, yeah, gnomes. It's really funny. They just kind of stitched them all in here and was like, yeah, you want to play an unhuman? Go nuts. But you don't get to pick one. It's just roll it. Unhuman starter packages, you just kind of add your hit points to a d10 to get your starter package. And what do the humans think of your people? And then these are alternate starter packages, which actually, this is my mom used this to make her character, Benedict Nutbush, and a really short index. Could have been longer because I think there's probably more references here, but that is the full exploration of Into the Odd, the remaster by Chris McDowall and Bastionland Press. And I've got to say, it's a 42-minute video because I kind of love it. I wasn't really expecting to love it as much as I do, but I think I'm turning into an odd-like head. So, yeah, thanks, Chris, for making it. Thank you for watching this far. If you have, if you like these videos, I hope you'll hit the like button. If you want to see more of them, you should subscribe. And if you want to be notified, hit the bell icon. If you want to get early access to videos like these, I do produce them once a week and release them a week early to my paid tier patrons over on patreon.com/WatcherDM. Or you can just go check out our free blog posts or our free mailing list on WatcherDM.com, where you can get all kinds of usable stuff for your table written by myself or my writing partner. Usually we include some art from different sources that we have. So, yeah, thanks so much for hanging out. Thanks for playing. I'll see you in the next one.